Great, we're getting some good responses here. Let's take 2 more minutes for any stragglers. Okay, fantastic. Just gonna share the results here. Let me make this a little bigger. Interestingly, it looks like about 50% of people said 5%. So preventing just 1% of customer churn can lead to 5% increase in revenue. Slightly less than that on the 7% side, and small corner of our universe saying 3%. The actual result is 5%. Preventing 1% of customer churn can lead to a revenue increase of 5%. There's some pretty well documented research that looked at results from across a variety of industries, and that's pretty astonishing, right? We all talk about the importance of plugging the leaky bucket and preventing customers from slipping away. But it turns out that there are concrete and compelling business results associated with every percentage of customer churn that we prevent. Okay, time for poll number 2. Again, we're just warming up to set the stage for the content here. The top 10% of customers, on average, drive what percent of revenue? Is it 20%, 30%, 40%, or 50%? I'm going to open the poll right now. Great, getting a good, nice distribution here. Let's take 3 more seconds to respond. Okay, fantastic. So looks like about 50% of respondents, 40% of respondents went with the top number here, 50%. So the top 10% of customers drive 50% of revenue. Roughly 37% said 40%, 20% said 30, and a small number, just 2% said 20%. Now, the actual answer here is 50%. So the top 10% of customers on average drive half of the revenue associated with a business. I think we've all probably heard of the 80-20 rule. 80% of revenue comes from just 20% of customers. In the retail space, we don't tend to see quite that level of saturation, but this is still pretty astonishing, right? That just a small sliver of the customer base is responsible for literally half of the value of your business. And this helps to explain in part why we're so fanatically focused on this question of churn prevention. Essentially there's, amongst the companies that we think are truly customer centric, there's a recognition that not all customers are equal, right? Customers are different in the ways that they engage with your brand and the lifetime value that they're expected to drive to the brand over the course of their relationship. This is a great dramatization of that point, that a tremendous amount of value is locked away in a very small percentage of customers. So salvaging any of those relationships from the top 10% can have major impact on the health and growth of your business. So let's talk a little bit about why, now we know why it matters. Why is it that this is a really tough nut to crack? If this were easy, I don't think we would have quite as many folks on the webinar today as we do, eager to hear best practices and guidance from similar retailers. Here at Kastora, we look out on the landscape and we see a number of reasons why the retail game is just fundamentally different today than it was even 10 years ago. It's like the rules of the game have changed. The things that have worked, the promotions, the communication strategies just aren't driving the same results today that they used to. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, and this is certainly no secret, not a unique insight from Kastora, but buying habits are evolving, and maybe evolving makes it sound like a gentler, more gradual change than it is. Buying habits are undergoing a fundamental revolution. The average number of touch points in a customer journey is increasing dramatically. Customers are engaging across more devices and more channels than ever before. Heck, there are way more channels for customers to engage on today than there were even 5 or 10 years ago. So there's this real proliferation of engagement and touch points that means that the customer journey is no longer quite as linear or funnel shaped as it used to be. Related to that, customers just have more things vying for their attention. And the way that we see this is shorter attention spans. It's less easy to grab a customer's attention with a well-crafted subject line or a compelling promotion than it was even just a few years ago. And the tried and true tactics that used to drive open rate and click-through just aren't delivering any longer. It's because the average attention span is being divided across dozens of screens, devices, and channels in a way that we've never seen. Not just is there a proliferation of devices and channels, ways to engage with a brand, there is legitimately way more choice out there. And the advent of radical price transparency, such as, I guess best epitomized by Amazon, means that customers now have essentially a limitless aisle, right? You're in the market for new glasses. Well, you can go with a legacy brand. You can go with a new dedicated startup like Warby Parker. There's just a tremendous proliferation of brand and product choices. And then lastly, we're seeing a real generational shift in preferences. All of this might be characterized in a way as a generational shift in preferences, but we see especially younger customers, the coveted millennial demographic, is engaging with brands in fundamentally different ways and for fundamentally different reasons. Gone are the days of building transactional loyalty just based on preference for one product. Brands today, in order to build long-term loyalty and repeat behavior, have to really communicate their brand essence and their mission in a compelling way. To explain to customers why they should care and not just why a particular product is right for them. All of this together has made the retail landscape more challenging than ever. Proliferation of channels has led to a tremendous number of data and channel silos across the organization. Shorter attention spans has led to an absolute race to the bottom in terms of promotional escalation. Way more choice has led to SKU proliferation, even amongst well-established legacy retailers. And this generational shift in preferences has left a lot of retailers really scrambling to figure out how they can connect with the next generation of shoppers as their current best customers begin to age out of their categories. And perhaps not surprisingly, because the landscape has been in constant flux, we tend to hear the last 10 years be described as the so-called retail apocalypse. Very sadly, many of the great legacy retailers, really iconic brands throughout the 20th century, have suffered from liquidity events, bankruptcy, really struggling to bring their product and service delivery model into the 21st century. And so there's been kind of a great culling of the retail herd, with doors being closed and retailers struggling to stay in business. But it's not all doom and gloom. Despite what you might read in the papers, and this is a question that has fascinated us endlessly at Costora, right? All you hear about is the shuttering of retail locations, the death of legacy retail, the retail apocalypse, and yet there are undeniably a number of retailers who have not just managed to inch along, licking their wounds, but have actually grown like gangbusters and thrived during this period. What is it that these retailers have in common? What's like the secret sauce? Well, let me show you just a few quick case studies or examples of retailers who have managed to buck the trend and drive incredible growth of their customer base, really cementing their status as some of the leading global retailers over the last 10 years. Zara, a great example of a company that has doubled down on speed of decision making and information flow by revolutionizing their supply chain to incorporate real-time information on customer feedback and trends into their design and distribution process. A fashion show runway that takes place in Milan. Within seconds, the Zara team is monitoring what trends are popping up on social media and trending. That information is then fed back to design, fed through their supply chain. And within a matter of weeks, or even in some cases days, derivative styles begin showing up in relevant store locations. It's the ultimate in closed loop feedback from customer insight to production to last mile delivery. And because they're able to kind of scrape signals of social engagement and customer intent and feed that back through their design and manufacturing process so effectively, they're able to capture demand while it's still hot. Nike, another great example of a legendary brand that has revolutionized its relationship with customers through the use of data, specifically smart data mining in order to build relationships that go well beyond transactional engagement with their customer base. Very, very nice quote here from Nike talking about the data and analytics tools that they use in order to deepen those customer relationships, engage with customers at the right time with relevant content, and actually incorporate customer insights into the process of product design. And then, of course, no presentation would be complete without referencing the elephant in the room, Amazon. In case anyone needs to make a case that Amazon is the ultimate in customer-centric marketing, or a business that's run on customer-centric principles, I think this is a great silver bullet, that 35% of their revenue comes from knowing their customers well enough and teasing out the hidden patterns in their customer data to actually drive relevant cross-sell recommendations. That's a really staggering statistic and a nice aspirational number for lots of retail brands out there. The long and short of this, and not that anybody's going to fall off their chair in surprise here, is that it is customer obsession, the discipline of infusing customer insights into all facets of a company's operations, that is the single thing that distinguishes the winners from the losers in retail. On every metric, companies that have a strong focus on customer analytics, understanding their customer, feeding that into everything from design and merchandising all the way down to store planning and operations and marketing, they simply outperform their peers who are not as customer obsessed, in some cases by quite a staggering margin. So with all of this as backdrop, the secret weapon of companies struggling to survive in this dog-eat-dog retail world being customer insights, why are we leading off a session on churn prevention with all of that? Well, it turns out that, as we saw earlier, a tremendous percent of a company's value is locked away in the relationships that it has with its existing customers. And even a small percentage increase in the efficacy of rescuing customers as they begin to show signs of fading away can drive absolutely transformational results for the business. In other words, churn is too important to ignore for a company that is striving to be customer-centric. We've got some nice stats here taken from the book that I won't go through, but you can see at a high level that fundamentally the health of the business relies on being able to retain and bring back customers, and it's an uphill battle with only 13% of customers professing loyalty to a particular brand. The positive side of this is that most customers who end their relationship with a brand because of, let's say an irrelevant marketing email or a bad service or delivery experience, a staggering percent of those, nearly 9 out of 10, feel that the company could have done something to retain them. And what we're going to learn over the next couple of minutes is exactly how those customer-obsessed companies are doing that, how they're stepping in before customers churn forever and bringing them back. Okay, quick and final poll of the day, just to help orient us here. When we think about preventing customer churn, most retailers that we talk to think about stepping in at the right time to power a win-back message. What approach does your company use to identify when a customer is churning? Is it 90 days without purchase, 180 days without purchase, a year without purchase, some other approach, or we don't yet have a churn program up and running? I'm going to open the poll here. Great. Let's take just one more moment to respond. Excellent. So real nice diversity of approaches here. This is a great launch pad for some of the best practices that we're going to be sharing throughout the course of this presentation. It's especially exciting to me, actually, to see the quarter of respondents who say they don't have a churn program in place yet. There is literally nothing but upside in store for you as you start taking your initial steps towards architecting a scalable way to prevent customer churn. So that's really exciting. Some nice diversity of approaches here around fixed business rules. The most common ones being a year without purchase, 90 days without purchase. I'm encouraged to see a third, roughly, of customers saying that they use some other approach. Hopefully, some of those folks are Custora customers, and we'll talk through the Custora approach and some of the benefits there. But great, this is a really nice way to anchor the conversation we're going to be talking about as we get into how we make the magic of churn prevention happen. So at a really high level, here's the framework that I would like to advocate. This is the Custora tried and true methodology for preventing customer churn. We think of it as involving 4 broad stages, and we'll spend some time diving into each of these to understand kind of best practices and tips and tricks. The first step is around consolidation, and really the crux here is aggregating and bringing together customer data in such a way that we can actually get a view of how customers are engaging with your brands. The number one enemy of churn prediction or churn prevention programs is not the absence of some fancy machine learning algorithm or AI powered recommendations. It's actually just not having the data together in a place where we can see how an individual customer is engaging with your brand over time. So step one is we're going to get all of the data aggregated and consolidated so that we can actually begin getting our hands dirty and teasing out some meaningful patterns. Step two, we'll talk you through Custora's approach to predicting customer churn and how it compares to some common one-size-fits-all business rules and other common approaches. We'll talk through the benefits of a predictive approach without exclusively advocating for a predictive one for those who are just looking to take some simple first steps. Lastly, we'll talk through the importance of making sure that your insights and audiences are connected to marketing execution tools. And lastly, we'll give you our point of view on the most effective way to do test and measurement, all with the goal of optimizing the program over time and getting it to a high-performing steady state. So consolidating data, this is complicated. I don't know if folks on the call have had the tremendous pleasure of seeing this complicated landscape before. This is the Lumascape. It's a graphic that shows essentially the different types of marketing technology out there. I think at last count, there were somewhere approaching 5,000 unique data and marketing tech providers. The point that we're trying to make here is whether you are aware of this consciously or not, chances are that your customer data, well, 2 points. A, you probably have all of the customer data that you need in order to begin to scale a churn prevention program. We've never yet in our many successful years of serving retail customers come across a retailer that did not have enough data to power a program like this or mine for insights. B, chances are that that data is actually fragmented or siloed across a number of systems. And so it can be really hard for your team to get a complete view of customer behavior. So just think about it. If you're an omni-channel retailer, chances are that you have in-store transactions housed within a POS, a point of sale system. You have e-commerce transactions housed within your ecom platform or internal database. How customers are engaging with your brand by email, well, that's squirreled away with your email service provider. Potentially your site tool knows how customers are browsing and visiting and clicking on site. Customer demographic attributes might be living in some other system. The first and most important step to getting the most out of your data is bringing it all together and organizing it into customer profiles. The way that we do this at Castora is by essentially connecting to all of a marketer's marketing technology tools and stitching data together using different types of customer identifiers. So let's say that you have an email address associated with the customer ID that lives in your marketing database. That email address can be used to link to how that customer is engaging with email open and click behavior, information that might be housed within the email service provider traditionally. So step one is find a way to aggregate and organize customer data that is probably fragmented across multiple systems. Step two, a little bit of line of sight into the Castora approach to predicting customer churn. It was kind of a trick question, the poll earlier around what approach your organization uses in order to identify customers who are at risk of churn. The reality is, having worked with hundreds of retailers, we've seen every approach under the sun, everything from 28 days without purchase equals churn to 3 years without purchase equals churn. What we've learned along the way is that each of those one-size-fits-all business rule approaches actually leaves tremendous value on the table. And here's why. Remember earlier when we were talking about customer heterogeneity, the fact that the top 10% of customers are predicted to drive 50% of revenue for your brand? Well, it's the same thing when we look under the hood at how customers are engaging with your brand. Chances are there are some, your best customers, who may be engaging with you daily or weekly, and other customers, probably the more typical behavior, who come around once a year and buy only on discount around holiday time. When we treat all of those customers the same, we apply a, let's say, 90-day no purchase rule to all of them, we're actually leaving money on the table in two ways. For our best customers, those folks who typically buy once a week, if we wait 90 days to reach out to them, they are long gone. We've missed any window of opportunity to intercept them and communicate with them. We still have a chance of salvaging the relationship. In contrast, when we think about those more typical, let's say once a year holiday shoppers, if we reach out at 90 days with an aggressive "we miss you" message and potentially a discount, we might be just accelerating a planned purchase that they would have made anyway, but throwing some discount against it. So just eroding our own margin. For this reason, a big cornerstone of the Castora approach is teasing out what makes one customer different from another and identifying the right moment in each customer's life cycle to reach out to him or her. So what you see here on the prediction slide is, let's say we have our best customer at the top, somebody who typically buys once a week. If that customer goes 25 days without purchase, that might be the right time to reach in with a churn prevention message for that customer. In contrast, a customer who typically buys once a month, for her, perhaps 95 days would have to elapse before, based on what we've seen from similar customers, that customer actually represents a churn risk to the business. So step two, once we've consolidated and organized all of our customer data, is begin to understand what's the right pattern and the right time to reach out to individual customers based on what we've seen from that customer and similar folks in the customer base. Step three, connect. I can't tell you how many times we've seen really, really well-intentioned, well thought out churn prevention programs die kind of the last mile, operational friction. It's always sad to see, right? Because teams that go the extra mile to identify when's the right time to reach out to individual customers, whether they're using the Castora approach or they're using some in-house predictive approach to figure out the right time to communicate, it's often very difficult to get those audiences automated and delivered kind of on a regular cadence into the marketing tools that actually are responsible for delivery. So if you're sending out a regular churn prevention email, whether it's daily or weekly, making sure that those lists get continually refreshed in your ESP and that there's an automated workflow built off of list refresh so that that email system is just humming along in automation. Same thing with Facebook and Google AdWords. The most ambitious teams that we see typically try to manufacture kind of a cross-channel journey, at least for their best customers as they show signs of fading away. That can really grind to a halt if there's not a nice automated way of keeping that system humming along and those audiences refreshed in your marketing tools. So step three, really, really important, is automating the delivery of those customer lists and the delivery of customer experiences based off of them. Now, the most important piece here, pillar number 4, is the test and measurement approach. So those who have been on Kastora webinars previously know that we are zealous, rabid advocates of a test and control approach in a way that goes a little bit beyond the typical A/B testing that we hear advocated by most channel tools. Now, with most A/B testing, let's say that you're running an email to understand which subject line is performing better. Idea A and idea B will be baked off against each other for some percentage of the customer base. Whichever exhibits the better open rate will get will be declared the winning idea, and that idea will be distributed to the remainder of the customer base. What we learned early on when we began working with retailers to power and scale churn prevention programs is that it's not enough to know which subject line is performing better in a churn program or which discount is driving a higher click-through rate. At the end of the day, what we want to measure is incremental changes in customer behavior. Which approach is actually leading more customers to be reactivated than would have been otherwise? And that's really the cornerstone of our test and measure approach. For that reason, we always advocate the use of holdout control groups. So a percentage of the customer base that does not receive an idea in question. So when we're running a churn prevention test with a certain segment, let's hold out, say, 10 or 15 or 20% of that segment that does not get the idea in question and use that as a benchmark or a baseline so that we can measure the reactivation or win back rate relative to those customers who would not have gotten the idea. We think of our test and measurement approach as having a couple of prongs. The first is to come up with some ideas. So think about, hey, if we were able to communicate one-on-one with our best customers as they show signs of fading away, what would we actually want to talk to them about? What are some of the value propositions or calls to action that we might want to highlight for them? Typically, that's a really fun stage for marketers because we didn't become marketers to shuffle around CSVs. It was because we want to come up with creative breakthrough approaches to communicating with different segments. So ideation is step 1, experimentation is step 2, using the controlled incremental measurement approach that I described previously. And then measurement is, let's say that we run a churn prevention program with a holdout group, and then we test a funny subject line against a serious subject line. How much incremental lift in revenue conversion and reactivation rate are we seeing for each of those approaches relative to the benchmark, the group that got nothing? And then, of course, the final pillar is when we see what's working, let's optimize. Perhaps in the example that I just gave, we see that the serious subject line outperforms the funny subject line in terms of incremental revenue and conversions. That's the approach that we would want to propagate to the rest of the customer base. Now, if this sounds like a lot of moving parts, it's actually not that complicated with the right methodology. Oftentimes when we work with teams that are starting with no churn prevention program, they want to go full steam ahead on all fronts, testing different subject lines, different offers, different creative. We've found that unfortunately that's tends to be a recipe for failure, right? When we're moving 20 different testing levers all at once. The approach that we advocate at Kastora is a crawl, walk, run approach, where perhaps the first phase before we get into offer optimization or machine learning driven subject line optimization is just testing, hey, what kind of incrementality, what's the extra revenue and reactivation that we see when we reach out to customers at the right time. That would be phase one, right? Is test something, maybe just a single email against the benchmark of doing nothing or a one size fits all approach. Then as we begin seeing our results come in, step two would be get progressively more nuanced or sophisticated with the types of segmentation uh, that we use at different phases of the customer life cycle. So again, for customers who are just showing signs of beginning to churn, perhaps we go from a one-size-fits-all message to one that's segmented out by a customer's predicted lifetime value. So we send um, our best offer, right? Our juiciest call to action to customers who have a high predicted lifetime value. In contrast, we reserve more relationship messaging, like we miss you, for customers who are more on the low value side of the tiering. And perhaps after that, as we begin to see what works, we get even more sophisticated. So within our high value, we sub-segment out by what's a user's optimal price point, what types of things do they typically buy, and we experiment with different creative. But ultimately, this is the tried and true approach that we've found minimizes time to value for 99.9% of retailers. Start simple, focus on the right time to reach out to customers, and then layer on progressively more sophisticated behavioral segmentation until you have a fully optimized churn prevention program in automation. Let's talk through a couple of quick case studies here. Um, actually, some really interesting, nice results from a variety of retailers. I'd actually like to start by talking through some of the amazing business results that we saw from a really exciting brand that we work with called Elkind. Elkind is a fast fashion plus size retailer that is growing exponentially quickly. They're a Kasora customer. We currently work with them on a variety of programs. But part of the reason that I like highlighting Elkind here is because of their incredibly visionary and novel approach to using churn prevention, not just to power marketing communication, but to power great strategic decisions as well. And I'd actually like to play for you a little clip of somebody who can tell the story much better than I can. This is Kelly Goldston, the VP of Marketing for Elkind.
Separately, we did a churn analysis.
Sorry, I just got a message that it looks like the sound isn't working. I was like rocking out to an incredible and eloquent presentation from Kelly Goldston. I guess I'll just have to summarize some of what she mentioned in her presentation. Sorry again, we can send out the video afterwards. Essentially, Elkind wanted to understand not just who's churning, right, to reach in and intercept them at the right time, but why are they churning? And so using predictive Kastora powered churn prevention, they not just put in place an approach to intercede and step in with an email communication as customers begin to show signs of fading away, but actually to reach out to their highest value customers right as they were showing signs of beginning to fade away, and try to get feedback, right? Like, what are we doing well? Why are you fading away? What could we improve? And the insights that they received from this qualitative research project absolutely floored them. They learned all kinds of rich feedback on what was working, what wasn't. Specifically, what stood out to Kelly and the executive team at Elkind was around garment fit, right? As a fast fashion plus size retailer, nailing the fit for every garment is absolutely essential. But they discovered, based on the feedback of churning customers, that they had a lot of room for improvement. And there were certain types of garments that systematically were not fitting well and were leading to a lot of merchandise returns. And so by identifying customers at the right point in their journey as they were beginning to show signs away, they got an incredible response rate, right? These were customers who were just beginning to lose their love for the brand and eager to offer constructive feedback on how to improve. But B, they actually gleaned incredibly actionable intelligence on how to improve their product. And they incorporated that back into the design specs and fit of their garments in a way that has helped them retain more customers and grow their business at a much faster rate than they were previously. And so we like talking about this because it's an incredible example of ingenuity on the part of retailers, leveraging churn prevention, not just to earn, like to drive incremental direct response and revenue from known customers, but to actually get insights and feedback that can be leveraged across other parts of the business to improve operations overall. The next case study that we want to talk through is from Teleflora, which is a wonderful flower delivery company. Prior to using Castora's churn prevention program, Teleflora was using a one-size-fits-all approach, similar to many folks on the phone here. But because the customers that engage with Teleflora do so on such wildly different cadences and for different reasons, they envisioned a churn prevention program that went well beyond one-size-fits-all and helped them identify like different inflection points as customers went from active to inactive or disengaged. Specifically, a number of key activity cliffs, customers just fading away, customers showing strong signs of fading away. And their vision was to actually architect an escalating win-back strategy, right? That would become more urgent and more call to action oriented the further a customer shows signs of fading off of her typical purchase path. Here's a really gorgeous example of some of the creative that they use. You can see that they modulated the call to action. They experimented with some different offers here. A really, really beautiful creative that they employed throughout the course of their crawl, walk, run testing to figure out what's the right message to deliver to the right customer at the right time. Ultimately, by cycling through experiments around timing, around offer escalation, and around creative, they were able to drive just absolutely phenomenal results for the business. They saw close to a 20% revenue lift per user in some groups, all the way up to a 25% lift in revenue for their furthest churned tier, customers who are really far gone and unlikely to engage in the future. These are incredible results, and these are the types of results that we see routinely with Castora customers who take the time to go through the tried and true churn prevention playbook. With that, I would like to just reiterate the outcome that we're looking to drive here. Obviously, our goal is to save more customers, specifically those best customers, knowing what a disproportionate share of value to the brand they drive over the course of their lifetime. The idea is to do so while minimizing the use of promotions. So we talked about not just throwing away discounts to accelerate planned purchases, but really figuring out who needs to be incentivized to make a purchase, who doesn't. And then lastly, less focus on logistics, like integration across channels, the nitty gritty of running predictive models at scale. Those are things that, at least in our experience, a vendor like a Castora is optimally suited to help out with, all with the goal of unlocking the creativity of the marketing team to figure out what strategies and communication approaches we should be testing. And so actually, I'd like to take a pause there. Maddie, I know, is on the line. Maddie, any questions that have been coming in over the course of the presentation?
Hey, Jordan. So we do have a few questions that have come in, and everyone, if you haven't gotten your questions in yet, please share them now. So Jordan, the first question that's come in is, what kind of models do you use to predict who's likely to churn? And does this work for subscription businesses?
Great question. Thank you. So Castora uses a wide variety of models to predict different behaviors in our platform. Those who are Castora customers know that in addition to churn prevention, we predict really every facet of a customer's engagement with a brand, everything from lifetime value to discount sensitivity to product affinities. And we use different models to do that. But really, the core set of models that we use for churn prevention is a set of probabilistic models called the Pareto negative binomial distribution, or Pareto NBD. This is good, like a cocktail party chatter. For those who care to remember this. But although it sounds fancy and complicated, the Pareto NBD actually starts with a nice, clean story about customer behavior, right? It starts with this story that customer lifetime value, far from being like just a random metric that we're going to throw hundreds of variables at and use some black box to optimize, customer lifetime value is actually a product of a couple of ways in which a customer engages with your brand. It's a product of how often a customer is likely to engage with your brand in the future. Is somebody like Jordan, let's say, a weekly customer, a monthly customer, an annual customer? How likely that customer is to stay engaged with the brand over time? So am I likely to begin churning at the 6-month mark, at the year mark? Am I never going to churn? And then how much that customer tends to spend on every purchase. Castora actually starts by taking on all historical data for a retailer so that we can characterize what these distributions of behavior look like throughout the customer base. What is the percentage of customers who tend to be weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on? And then on the individual customer level, we use hundreds or thousands of data points to do what we consider kind of lookalike matching, right? To figure out where an individual customer fits in the context of those distributions. So let's say we have just had a customer like Maddie join our customer base. She came in buying a belt and she came through the affiliate site, Retail Me Not. Castora will look through similar patterns amongst previous customers to try to fit where Maddie is likely to be on each of these distributions. And perhaps we see, based on what she came in buying, her acquisition channel, what device she came in on her path to purchase, that she's somebody where we would expect her to make a second purchase within her first 30 days. Now, if she doesn't do so at day 45 or 50, the models will begin to sound the alarm and say, hey, it looks like she's fading off of her typical purchase patterns. So these models are incredibly nuanced and sophisticated. They do a great job of incorporating all kinds of behavioral and demographic variables to create really accurate individual level predictions. These are models that are actually purpose-built for retail and hybrid businesses. Hybrid being, hey, if you're like a pet food supplier and you have customers who come in and buy bags of pet food, but you also have an auto ship or replenishment program, they're less well suited to predicting churn in a subscription context. That's actually one of the exciting avenues of research that we're undertaking now with a couple of beta customers on the Castora side is how can Castora models be leveraged to or extended to identify subscription-based churn.
Thank you, Jordan. So the next question is somewhat related. Can I do this on my own without a tool like Castora?
Yeah, I love that question because we are all about looking to empower folks to unlock the value of their data, whether or not it's with a tool like Castora. I think in our experience, what is typically the most challenging step for organizations looking to do this on their own is actually the data aggregation or consolidation step. So phase one, you're in a really good position if you are a, let's say, pure play e-commerce player, and you have all of your customer data and transactional data living in a tool like a Magento or Shopify or Demandware. In that case, you don't suffer from many of the data fragmentation or data stitching issues that we see coming up with larger brands. But assuming that you do have all of your transactional data in one place and you're able to extract it for analysis, here's a quick and dirty approach that we've seen some retailers taking as they try to build and scale a program like this on their own. It's often difficult to run predictive models, much less incorporating hundreds or thousands of variables. But if you have access to, let's say, individual level transaction data, you can see what people bought on their first purchase, their second purchase, and so on. Do a little bit of cohort analysis. For those who aren't familiar with cohort analysis, it's a way of grouping customer data based on common life cycle milestones, like people who made their first purchase. So take a look at all customers who came in making a purchase of product X or Y over the last few quarters, and look at how long it typically takes before they interact or make their next purchase with the brand. Even if it's just your top 5 categories, perhaps customers who come in buying, let's say, dresses tend to repeat in 90 days. Customers who tend to come in buying shoes have a longer inter-purchase cadence. They come in once every 6 months. This is a very, very significant improvement on just a simple average time to second purchase metric, which we see as being the kind of common starting point for many brands. So if your data is already consolidated in one place in an e-commerce platform, do some cohort analysis to look at typical time in between purchases for common entry points with the brand, and then think about setting up some post-purchase journeys within, let's say, just your email service provider to start as a result. So an example, let's say that I have Magento and my email service provider is Bronto. Perhaps I analyze my data from Magento and I realize, hey, customers who come in buying product X, I should really sound the alarm if they don't come in, make a second purchase within 90 days. I could then easily set that up as a journey or a flow within Bronto, assuming that my Magento data is hooked up to Bronto. And so that provides a nice kind of DIY way to, in a data-driven fashion, explore some of the heterogeneity in customer engagement patterns and set up some business rules that are better than one size fits all and automatically connected to your marketing execution platforms.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. So this is our final question. How does this churn prevention approach relate to the research that you did on the customer metrics driving growth?
Great question. So Maddie is referring to, well, actually, Maddie, do you want to tell us a little bit about the research since you've been an integral part of it?
Sure. So this is a report that Jordan and I did together. So very proud of it. And if you guys joined the last webinar that Corey, our CEO, hosted a couple of weeks ago, he actually went through that. And if you're interested, I can send that to you after this webinar is finished. So we wanted to look at which customer metrics, so metrics like retention rate, reactivation rate, order frequency, AOV, and customer acquisition had the greatest or strongest relationship with revenue growth. So we looked across our awesome base of customers, all of whom are retailers, and did a multivariate analysis to try and figure out which of those did have the strongest relationship with growth. I don't know, Jordan, if I should give away what the answer is.
I'll give away the answer. So for those of you who are waiting with bated breaths, like, man, did I waste the last hour of my life on this webinar because churn doesn't actually matter? Don't worry. Churn prevention, or specifically reactivating customers, is highly statistically significantly correlated with growth. So it is undeniably a benefit to your organization to focus on implementing a churn prevention program. However, there's an interesting twist here, which I think speaks a little bit to some of the methodology pieces that we've been talking about, like the importance of doing good incremental test and control measurement to see what's actually moving the needle. When we factor in a bunch of additional metrics that are related to customer or company growth, so things like the velocity of customer acquisition, the ability to drive repeat purchases for customers, the ability to grow average order value, we actually see the impact of churn prevention per se shrink quite a bit, right? To the point where it's actually not statistically significantly associated when you factor in all of those other moving pieces. So this is a really funky thing to think through. It's tough to interpret, right? That like when I look just at churn prevention, it has an incredibly positive impact. But when I layer in my ability to drive lots of repeat orders and grow customer value in other ways, churn prevention in and of itself doesn't have a statistically significant effect. I think there's actually a really, really nice interpretation, which goes back to the importance of retaining your best customers and retaining customers at the right time who are actually fading away. And the way that I interpret this is that just getting customers back in the door, bribing them with like a 90% discount, let's say, that's not going to move the needle on your business. If the goal were like reactivate as many lost customers as possible, we could all think of incredibly cheesy and aggressive ways to do that today. But I think in our heart of hearts, we all know that it's not so much the getting them to come back and make that one incremental purchase that matters. It's actually winning them back in a meaningful and sustainable way so that they make follow-on purchases after that. In other words, that we're actually winning them back and not just bribing them to make that single follow-up purchase. And that was what the research showed as clear as day, right? That it's organizations that are approaching win back in the right way, focusing on reaching to customers who are actually fading away at the right time, and thinking about the whole system of winning them back and keeping them engaged over time. Those are the businesses that are driving the most important results. So all of today has been a little bit of an introduction or a primer in our methodology, which is focused on really building customer lifetime value by reaching the right customers at those key moments in their life cycle. I think the research was a nice validation that methodology is indeed associated with metrics that the C-suite cares about, like top line growth and increase in stock price.
Great. Thank you so much, Jordan. And thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks so much. It was my pleasure. I look forward to having you guys join us on future webinars.